I'm Samantha Mitchell, 32 years old, and I just purchased a $5.2 million mansion with cash. Standing in my marble entryway, I can still hear my parents' dismissive voices from years ago. You'll never own a house like your brother. The irony isn't lost on me as I run my fingers along the imported Italian countertops, the very same ones Jason had been gushing about for months as he struggled to secure financing. My phone lights up, his name flashing across the screen. Perfect timing. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and proving doubters wrong. Let's get into how I went from the overlooked sister to the one writing the 8-figure checks. Growing up 3 years behind Jason Mitchell was like living in permanent eclipse. In our suburban Chicago home, the sun rose and set on my brother's achievements while mine remained in darkness. Our family dynamic was established early. Dad, Richard Mitchell, was a successful commercial real estate developer who saw Jason as his legacy, his mini-me. Mom, Diana, was more subtle but equally complicit, her calendar marked with Jason's events in red and mine in pencil if they made it there at all. Jason's room resembled a shrine to accomplishment, gleaming trophies from baseball championships, debate tournaments, and science fairs lined his shelves. Meanwhile, my academic awards and writing competition certificates were tucked away in a folder somewhere, occasionally acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before conversation returned to Jason's latest triumph. I remember when I was 9, I won first place in a statewide writing competition. My story was even published in a children's literary magazine. That same weekend, Jason hit the winning home run in a regular season baseball game. Guess which achievement warranted a celebration dinner, and which one was mentioned as an afterthought during dessert? "Your brother has real talent," Dad would say, clapping Jason on the shoulder. "Natural ability you can't teach." The message was clear. Jason was exceptional. I was adequate. High school only magnified the disparity. When Jason was accepted to Princeton, my parents threw a massive party, inviting everyone from Dad's colleagues to distant relatives. 2 years later, when I graduated as valedictorian, my speech was cut short because we needed to hurry home. Jason was visiting from college, and Mom had prepared his favorite meal. "We're so proud of you," Mom said distractedly as we rushed to the car. My graduation cap still perched on my head. But you know how Jason gets when dinner's late. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother, Ruth, Mom's mother. Unlike her daughter, Grandma Ruth had built her own accounting firm in the 1970s when female CPAs were rare. She recognized something in me that my parents missed. "They're blind to what's right in front of them," she told me once while we sat on her porch swing. I was 16 and crying after Dad had dismissed my business proposal for a summer project. I showed him the market research and everything. I sobbed. He didn't even read it before saying no. Grandma Ruth handed me a tissue. "Some people can only see what they expect to see, Samantha. Your father expects greatness from Jason, so that's what he sees, deserved or not. He doesn't expect it from you, so he misses it." She squeezed my hand. "Remember this. Success is the sweetest revenge. Not because it hurts others, but because it forces them to see you clearly for the first time." I didn't realize then how prophetic her words would be. Even in those early years, there were signs of my business acumen that should have been obvious. At 12, I organized a neighborhood service connecting seniors with teens for yard work and errands, taking a small percentage as the coordinator. By 15, I'd saved enough to invest in stocks with Grandma Ruth's guidance. By 17, I'd tripled that investment. But in the Mitchell household, Jason's C+ in economics garnered more attention than my growing portfolio. When I tried discussing market trends with Dad, hoping to connect through his interests, he'd pat my head and say, "That's cute, Sammy. When you're older, you'll understand how these things really work." I graduated high school with enough credits for sophomore, standing in college, and a determination that would fuel me through the years ahead. If my success would be built without their support, so be it. I would build it anyway. While Jason cruised through Princeton on our parents' dime, I cobbled together scholarships, loans, and part-time jobs to attend Northwestern University. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus coffee shop, another 15 tutoring economics, and still maintained a 3.9 gigapascals in my business and computer science double major. We'd help if we could, Mom would say during our monthly calls. But Jason's graduate school applications are so expensive, and your father is helping him network with the right people. I stopped asking after the first semester. Between serving lattes and coding until dawn, I discovered my passion, the emerging world of tech startups. This was 2010. Facebook was taking over the world. The first iPad was released, and the startup ecosystem was electric with possibility. I devoured everything I could about the industry, attending tech meetups in Chicago and building connections despite my limited resources. During my junior year, I took an entrepreneurship seminar with Professor Helen Walsh, a former venture capitalist who'd funded 3 unicorn startups before turning to academia. Unlike most professors who gravitated toward Jason types, confident, polished, and male, Professor Walsh saw through presentation to substance. After I presented my analysis of market gaps in the financial technology sector, she asked me to stay after class. "You think differently, Samantha," she said, organizing her papers. "Most students identify existing problems and propose incremental solutions. You see systems and their weaknesses." By the end of the semester, I developed my first serious business plan under her mentorship, a mobile application that would analyze spending patterns and automatically optimize users' subscription services, identifying redundancies and negotiating better rates. Professor Walsh was impressed. "This has legs, Mitchell. With the right backing, you could disrupt an entire industry segment." For the first time, I felt truly seen for my abilities. When Thanksgiving break came, I made the mistake of bringing my excitement home. Our family had gathered for the traditional Mitchell Thanksgiving, Dad carving the turkey with ceremonial precision, Mom fussing over Jason's favorite sides, and Jason holding court with stories from his Ivy League life. When there was finally a lull in the Jason worship, Mom turned to me. "How are your classes, dear? Still enjoying that computer thing?" I seized the moment, explaining my app concept, the market research I'd conducted, and Professor Walsh's encouragement. Dad looked interested for once. "Sounds like you've put some thought into this. How would the revenue model work?" For 15 glorious minutes, I had their attention. Dad asked intelligent questions. Mom seemed genuinely impressed, and even Jason leaned forward, listening intently. That should have been my first warning. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Mom, bubbling with excitement. "Your father is investing in Jason's new business venture. Isn't that wonderful?" My stomach dropped. "What venture?" "Some technology thing about subscriptions. Jason presented the whole plan last weekend. Your father was so impressed he's putting in $50,000 as seed money." The room spun. "Mom, that's my idea. I told you all about it at Thanksgiving." A pause. "Oh, honey, I think you're confused. Jason's been working on this for months. He just hadn't mentioned it before." The betrayal cut deep, but the family gaslighting that followed was worse. When I confronted Jason, he feigned ignorance, suggesting we'd probably just had similar ideas because great minds think alike. Dad dismissed my claims entirely. "Don't be ridiculous, Samantha," he said when I called him. "Your brother has been networking with tech investors all semester. This is his brainchild." The final blow came from Mom. "Don't be jealous of your brother's creativity, Samantha. It's not attractive." I hung up and cried until my throat was raw. Then I called Professor Walsh. "They stole my concept," I told her, voice still ragged. "My own brother and father." She was silent for a moment. "Welcome to entrepreneurship, Samantha. Ideas get stolen. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do? He has Dad's money and connections. And you have something more valuable," she replied. "You have the original vision and the skills to execute it. Plus, you now have me." Professor Walsh connected me with 2 angel investors from her network. "They're looking for female founders in fintech," she explained. "But they'll fund you because your idea is better and you know it inside and out." 3 months later, while Jason was still spending Dad's money on logo designs and business cards, I secured $200,000 in seed funding, with Professor Walsh contributing $50,000 of her own money as a vote of confidence. It was my first lesson in entrepreneurial resilience. For women, especially those without connections, success often requires working twice as hard for half the recognition. It was also my first taste of how sweet it would feel to prove them all wrong. After graduation, I made a clean break. No more seeking parental approval. No more competing with Jason. I moved to a tiny studio apartment in Seattle as far from Chicago as seemed practical and focused entirely on building my company, now called Optimize Pro. The apartment was so small I could touch opposite walls with outstretched arms. My furniture consisted of a futon, a desk from Goodwill, and plastic storage bins. But it was mine, paid for with my work, not family connections. Seattle's tech ecosystem was thriving, and I found myself surrounded by kindred spirits driven, innovative, and meritocratic in ways Chicago's old money business scene never was. At a local hackathon, I met Rachel Hayes, a brilliant front-end developer with an eye for user experience. "Your back-end architecture is elegant," she said, peering over my shoulder at 3 a.m. as we both worked through the night. "But your interface will scare away average users." I laughed. Brutal honesty. I like it. Rachel became not just my first hire but my business partner. We complemented each other perfectly, my systems thinking and financial acumen paired with her design instincts and people skills. Together, we refined Optimize Pro into something more ambitious than my original concept. Instead of just managing subscriptions, our platform would analyze all recurring expenses, leveraging AI to negotiate lower rates automatically and identify money-saving opportunities that most people miss. Banks could offer it as a value-added service, and we'd take a percentage of the savings. By day, I worked as a junior systems analyst for a local tech firm, learning the industry from the inside. Nights and weekends belonged to Optimize Pro. Rachel kept her job as a UX consultant, and we pooled our savings to hire contract developers. Our first real breakthrough came 8 months in, when we won a regional fintech innovation competition with a $50,000 prize. The validation was sweet, but the connections were invaluable. Suddenly, investors were approaching us. Around this same time, news filtered through the family grapevine. Jason's company had folded after burning through Dad's investment and another $200,000 from Dad's golf buddies. The product never made it past beta. "Such a shame," Mom said during one of our increasingly infrequent calls. "Jason had such a bold vision. Sometimes the market just isn't ready for true innovation." I bit my tongue. Dad was more direct. "Your brother took a real swing. That's what matters in business, having the courage to try big things." The subtext was clear. Jason's failure was somehow more impressive than my steady progress. With our competition prize and a small friends and family round, we developed a working prototype and secured our first banking partner, a small credit union willing to pilot our technology. Results exceeded even our projections. The average user saved $537 annually, and the credit union saw a 22% increase in customer satisfaction scores. Word spread through the fintech community. Just as we were preparing to raise our first formal funding round, I received an unexpected text from Jason. "In Seattle for a conference. Dinner tonight? Want to catch up?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. Over overpriced sushi, Jason was uncharacteristically interested in my work. "So you're really making this subscription thing happen, huh? Dad said you won some contest." I gave him a sanitized overview, careful to avoid specifics. He seemed genuinely impressed, or at least convincingly faked it. "Listen," he said as we finished our meal. "I've been thinking about getting back into tech. My experience taught me a lot about what not to do." I nodded noncommittally. "What would you think about bringing me on at Optimize Pro? I could help with business development, use Dad's connections, make it a family business." I nearly choked on my green tea. "I don't think that would work, Jason. We have different approaches." His expression hardened slightly. "Is this because of that Thanksgiving thing?" "Come on, Sammy. We had similar ideas, that's all. Water under the bridge." "It's not personal," I lied. "Our team dynamic works well as is." 2 weeks later, Rachel came to me with an uncomfortable revelation. "Your brother contacted me on LinkedIn," she said, showing me the message. He offered me a significant equity stake to join his new venture that would improve on Optimize Pro's concept. My blood ran cold as I read his pitch. He'd basically described our exact roadmap for the next year. He said you were thinking too small, and that with his connections, we could scale 10 times faster, Rachel continued. I told him I'm loyal to you and our vision, but I thought you should know. This betrayal felt different, more calculated, more threatening. Jason wasn't just stealing my ideas now, he was trying to poach my team. When confronted by phone, he was unapologetic. It's just business, Sammy. Dad always says you should hire the best people. Despite this setback, Optimize Pro continued gaining momentum. 3 months later, we closed our first major funding round, $2 million at a $10 million valuation. The investment was led by a prominent female-focused VC firm, with Professor Walsh's introduction opening the door. The day after TechCrunch published an article about our raise, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in months. My mother. Samantha. Darling. We just saw the news. Your father and I are so proud. We'd love to reconnect. Maybe you could fly home for the weekend? Our treat, of course. How convenient that they wanted to reconnect now that I'd achieved a level of success they couldn't ignore. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel desperate for their approval. I had something better. Validation from the market, from investors who believed in me, and from users who found value in what we'd built. I'm pretty busy with the company right now, I replied. Maybe in a few months. Mom's disappointment was audible, but I found I didn't mind. I was building something important, with people who believed in me from the start, not just when I became impossible to ignore. The next 3 years were a blur of growth, challenges, and increasingly sweet validation. Optimize Pro evolved from a promising startup to a fintech darling, with our user base growing exponentially as we partnered with larger banks and financial institutions. Our revolutionary payment processing system, which we developed as an extension of our core technology, was becoming the industry standard. The proprietary algorithms we'd built could analyze transaction patterns across millions of accounts, identifying savings opportunities and negotiating discounts automatically. Users loved waking up to notifications that we'd just saved them money while they slept. Corporate clients began approaching us, wanting to integrate our API into their own financial products. Our team grew from 5 people working out of a co-working space to 50 employees occupying 2 floors of a downtown Seattle office building. Incorporated magazine named us one of the startups to watch, and I was featured in a Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Each public recognition brought a flurry of congratulatory messages from distant relatives and former classmates, and increasingly awkward overtures from my immediate family. Meanwhile, Jason had launched his second venture, a cryptocurrency trading platform funded, once again, by our father. Despite the booming crypto market, Jason's company struggled with regulatory issues and technical difficulties. During a rare trip home for Christmas, I found myself subjected to the familiar Mitchell family dynamics, only slightly recalibrated to acknowledge my success. Optimize Pro is really taking off, Dad commented over dinner. You know, Jason's new company could use someone with your technical background. Have you thought about bringing him on board, helping him out? I set down my fork. Optimize Pro is a team of 50 highly qualified professionals. We hire based on skills and cultural fit. But he's family, Mom interjected. Family businesses have built this country. Optimize Pro isn't a family business, I replied evenly. It's a venture-backed technology company with responsibilities to our investors, partners, and users. The tension was palpable until Jason broke it with forced joviality. Hey, no pressure, I'm doing fine on my own. Crypto Trade just secured office space in the Loop. Dad beamed. Prime real estate. That's how you make a statement in business. I bit my tongue, knowing their prime real estate was burning through capital that should have gone to product development. After dinner, Dad cornered me in the kitchen. You know, Samantha, you've done well for yourself, and I'm proud of you. But don't forget where you came from. The values your mother and I instilled in you are the foundation of your success. I nearly laughed. What values? The ones that taught me my accomplishments would always be secondary to my brothers. The lesson that my ideas were only valid when coming from someone else? Actually, I said, loading the dishwasher, I succeeded despite lacking the support you gave, Jason. Everything Optimize Pro has achieved came without your connections, your money, or your encouragement. Dad's face reddened. That's a bit ungrateful, don't you think? Your mother and I gave you every advantage. You gave Jason every advantage, I corrected him. You gave me the chance to learn self-reliance. Before he could respond, Mom and Jason joined us. Mom carrying dessert plates. What are you two discussing so seriously? Just business, Dad muttered. The real bombshell dropped a week after I returned to Seattle. Our legal team discovered that Jason had applied for a patent on technology, suspiciously similar to our payment processing system's architecture. The application was filed 3 months ago, our lawyer explained, showing me the documents. It's different enough from our implementation to raise questions, but the core concept is unmistakably derived from your system. How would he even know the details of our architecture? Rachel demanded. That information isn't public. A security audit revealed the answer. Someone had been accessing our development servers from Chicago IP addresses for months. The infiltration was sophisticated enough to suggest professional help. When confronted by our lawyers, Jason initially denied everything, then claimed he'd developed the technology independently. It was only when presented with evidence of the server access that he admitted to doing research. I didn't steal anything, he insisted during our tense phone call. I was just staying informed about industry developments. By hacking into our servers? I was livid. Hacking is a strong word. I was monitoring a competitor. We're not competitors, Jason. We're in completely different segments. His laugh was cold. Everything's competition, Sammy. Dad taught me that. The legal battle that ensued created a deeper rift in our family. Dad openly sided with Jason, claiming I was overreacting to standard industry practices. Mom pleaded for reconciliation without addressing the actual violation. Only Grandma Ruth stood firmly in my corner. Your brother has always taken shortcuts, she told me during one of our weekly calls. And your parents have always enabled him. Don't back down on this, Samantha. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. Her support meant everything, especially as her health began to decline. At 84, Grandma Ruth was still sharp as ever mentally, but her congestive heart failure was worsening. I may not see how this all plays out, she said matter-of-factly during one visit, but I know who'll come out on top. You've built something real, something honest. That always wins in the long run. Her confidence sustained me through the months of legal wrangling, which eventually ended in a settlement. Jason would withdraw his patent application, and we would not pursue damages if he signed a comprehensive non-compete agreement. To the outside world, Optimize Pro continued its meteoric rise, unaffected by this family drama. But inside, I felt hardened by the experience, more determined than ever to prove that integrity and innovation would ultimately triumph over shortcuts and connections. The email arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, so innocuous I nearly missed it among the flood of daily correspondence. The sender was from Tech Fusion, one of the largest technology corporations in the world. We've been watching Optimize Pro's growth with interest, it read. Our acquisition team would like to discuss potential synergies. I forwarded it to Rachel with a single question mark. Her response came seconds later. Is this what I think it is? It was. Tech Fusion wanted to buy Optimize Pro. The initial meeting was surreal, our small team of executives sitting across from Tech Fusion's corporate development department in their gleaming Seattle headquarters. They praised our technology, our growth metrics, and especially our retention rates. Users don't just try your product, they become evangelists, their VP of strategy noted. That's rare and valuable. When they finally named a number $80 million, I maintained my poker face while my heart hammered against my ribs. Rachel, less practiced at hiding her emotions, nearly dropped her water glass. Back at our office, we celebrated briefly before getting serious. It's a strong offer, our CFO acknowledged, but given our trajectory and the strategic value of our technology to them, we could push for more. After consulting with our board and investors, we decided to negotiate. The dance lasted 2 tense weeks, but ultimately Tech Fusion increased their offer to $120 million. with the stipulation that Rachel and I would stay on for at least 2 years in leadership roles. The day we signed the acquisition papers was the most financially transformative of my life. My founder's share translated to just over $42 million after taxes, a sum so large it felt abstract, theoretical rather than actual money in my account. Business Insider ran a feature on the acquisition, complete with a photo of Rachel and me outside our office. The headline read, "From dorm room to $120M. Exit. How 2 women revolutionized financial technology." My phone nearly exploded with notifications. Former classmates, distant relatives, and long-lost friends all suddenly remembered my existence. Among the avalanche of congratulatory messages was one from Jason. "Congrats, sis. Always knew you had it in you." His sudden support felt hollow after years of undermining and competition, but I responded with a simple thanks. Whatever game he was playing, I wasn't interested. Mom called immediately, effusive in her praise. "We always believed in you, darling. Your father is telling everyone his daughter just sold her company for millions." Dad's call came later, more measured but noticeably warm. "Impressive deal, Samantha. I'd love to discuss your investment strategy moving forward. Maybe I could offer some guidance." I thanked him politely but non-committally. After a lifetime of dismissing my financial acumen, he now wanted to advise me on my millions. The irony wasn't lost on me. A family reunion was inevitable, and 3 weeks after the acquisition closed, I found myself back in Chicago for a dinner at my parents' home. Jason arrived with his new girlfriend, a marketing executive he'd met at a crypto conference. Dad had invited several of his business associates, clearly eager to bask in reflected glory. "Our Samantha always had a head for numbers," he told them, arm around my shoulders in a gesture that felt foreign after years of distance. "Gets that from my side of the family." Mom had reframed a print of the Business Insider article, displayed prominently in the living room. "We're just so proud," she kept saying to anyone who would listen. For a brief, dizzying moment, I felt what it might have been like to grow up with this kind of support and recognition. It was intoxicating and disorienting at once. Jason played the role of proud brother perfectly, toasting my success and reminiscing about always knowing I'd do something special. If I hadn't known him my entire life, I might have been fooled. It was Rachel who discovered the truth behind this sudden family unity. She'd stayed in Seattle to handle transition details and called me the morning after the family dinner. "You need to see this," she said, her voice tight. Checking some final legal documentation, I found communications between Tech Fusion and potential references they contacted before approaching us. She sent the files, and my stomach dropped as I read them. Among the people Tech Fusion had reached out to was my father, nearly 2 months before we received their initial email. Further digging revealed that Jason and Dad had been systematically contacting our investors and even some of our banking partners, seeking information about our technology and financial position. They had represented themselves as family advisors concerned about the company's stability. They were trying to drive down our valuation, Rachel concluded. Create doubt about our longevity so Tech Fusion could get us cheaper. The betrayal was breathtaking in its calculation. They hadn't just attempted to undermine me. They'd tried to sabotage the financial outcome for everyone who had believed in Optimize Pro, our team, our investors, Professor Walsh. Confronting them would have been pointless. They would deny, deflect, and gaslight as they always had. Instead, I collected all the evidence, had our lawyers document everything, and quietly extricated myself from their renewed attempts at closeness. The final blow to this chapter came unexpectedly. Grandma Ruth passed away in her sleep the night after I returned to Seattle. Her nurse found her peaceful, with a half-written letter to me on her nightstand. The funeral brought me back to Chicago just days after leaving. My parents were appropriately somber, but I maintained emotional distance, going through the motions of shared grief while feeling utterly alone in my loss. Ruth had been my true north, my one family member who saw and appreciated me for who I actually was. After the service, Ruth's lawyer approached me. "She left something for you," he said, handing me an envelope. She was quite specific about delivering it privately. Inside was a brief handwritten note and a bank statement showing a modest savings account with $127,342.16. Samantha, the note read in Grandma Ruth's elegant script. This isn't much compared to what you've already achieved, but it's given with true pride in the woman you've become. Use it to build something they can't ignore or take credit for. Remember, the best revenge isn't just success, it's success on your own terms. All my love, Grandma Ruth. I folded the note carefully and put it in my purse. My decision made. I would honor her final advice in ways my family could never anticipate. Grandma Ruth's modest inheritance became the cornerstone of what I built next. Not because of the amount, which was indeed small compared to my acquisition proceeds, but because of the intention behind it. This was money given with genuine belief in me, not as leverage or for reflected glory. I used it to launch the Ruth Mitchell Foundation for Women in Technology, providing mentorship and seed funding to female founders facing the same barriers I had. It became my side passion while I fulfilled my obligations at Tech Fusion. Meanwhile, I channeled my personal wealth into a new venture, Mitchell Capital, an investment fund specializing in women-led startups that traditional VC firms overlooked. The mission was personal, but the approach was ruthlessly professional. I'm not funding women because it's charitable, I told a skeptical male investor at a finance conference. I'm funding them because they're undervalued assets with outsized return potential. The market inefficiency here is staggering. Within 18 months, our first fund closed with $75 million under management, and our initial investments were already showing promising results. Business publications began describing me with terms like shrewd, discerning, and occasionally intimidating descriptors rarely applied to my brother despite his attempts to position himself as a serious crypto entrepreneur. As my professional reputation solidified, I began making personal investments as well. Real estate particularly interested me, not just for the financial returns, but for the tangible satisfaction of owning physical assets. My first luxury purchase was a $1.2 million condo overlooking Lake Washington, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a dedicated office space for my growing operations. When photos of my new home appeared in a local lifestyle magazine featuring successful tech executives, my mother called immediately. "Darling, what a gorgeous place. You didn't tell us you were buying such a beautiful home." "It's just a condo, Mom," I downplayed, knowing what was coming. "Well, it's lovely. Though not quite as impressive as the lakefront property your brother is considering. 5 bedrooms, private dock, quite the statement piece." Some things never changed. Through a mutual friend, I met Michael Freeman, a successful architect specializing in sustainable commercial buildings. Intelligent, creative, and refreshingly unpretentious, Michael was the first man I dated who seemed genuinely unintimidated by my success. Most men either try to compete with me or fetishize my achievements. I told Rachel over lunch after our third date, "Michael just seems comfortable with it all." "About time you found someone secure enough to handle Samantha Mitchell," she laughed. "Though I'd still run a background check if I were you." I didn't run a background check, but I did proceed with caution, keeping our relationship private for the first few months. When things became serious, I finally introduced him to my parents during a weekend trip to Chicago. To my surprise, they were charming and welcoming. Dad and Michael bonded over architectural details of historic Chicago buildings, while Mom showed uncharacteristic interest in my latest investments. Even Jason, who joined us for dinner Saturday night, was on his best behavior, discussing his new venture, a blockchain-based real estate investment platform that was actually showing promising early results. "Dad put together quite the investor group for this one," Jason mentioned, shooting our father an appreciative glance. "Having the right backers makes all the difference." Speaking of backing, Dad interjected, "Jason's platform has already facilitated over $10 million in property transactions. He's becoming quite the name in Chicago real estate circles." Mom beamed. "We're just so blessed to have 2 such successful children. Though in such different worlds, Samantha with her technology and investing, and Jason following more in your footsteps." Richard. The familiar dynamic was reasserting itself, but this time it didn't sting. I had built enough of my own success that their approval no longer felt necessary. The weekend ended pleasantly enough, and Michael and I returned to Seattle, our relationship stronger for having survived the Mitchell family dynamics. For a few months, everything seemed perfect. My business was thriving, my personal life was fulfilling, and even my family relationships had reached a state of tolerable détente. Then came the fifth betrayal, more painful than all the others because it involved Michael. It started with small inconsistencies, Michael asking unusually detailed questions about Mitchell Capital's investment criteria, being particularly interested in our data analytics systems, canceling plans last minute due to client emergencies that he was oddly vague about. My suspicions grew when I noticed him taking a phone call outside during a dinner party, his expression unusually serious. When he came back inside, he claimed it was a contractor about a project issue, but the tension in his jaw told a different story. The confirmation came from an unexpected source. Tessa Wong, a brilliant financial analyst I'd hired away from Goldman Sachs, requested an urgent meeting one Wednesday morning. I received a LinkedIn message that concerned me, she began, sliding her tablet across the desk to me. The message was from Jason, mentioning that our mutual friend Michael speaks highly of your work and suggesting a discreet conversation about potential collaborations. My blood ran cold. Michael and Jason have never met outside of that one dinner. Tessa nodded grimly. That's what I thought. I did some digging. She pulled up a series of social media posts showing Michael at a crypto conference in Miami 2 weeks earlier during his supposed work trip to Portland. In one photo, he was clearly engaged in conversation with Jason. The confrontation with Michael was brief and devastating. It wasn't what you think, he protested when I presented the evidence. Jason reached out to me. He said he wanted to mend fences, that he regretted how competitive things had been between you two. And you believed him? After everything I told you? Michael's expression shifted from defensive to defiant. Look, he's still your brother, and frankly, Samantha, you can be pretty intense about your family. I thought I was helping. By secretly meeting with him? By connecting him with my team members? What information have you shared with him? His silence was answer enough. Get out, I said quietly. Now, after he left, I sat alone in my condo, looking out at the lake as evening fell. The betrayal hurt more than I wanted to admit, not just because I'd loved Michael, but because I'd finally let my guard down, believing I could have both success and personal happiness. The next day, I called Tessa into my office again. I want to thank you for your loyalty, I said. It means more than you know. She smiled. I believe in what we're building here, and I know loyalty matters to you, it matters to me too. As we discussed security protocols to prevent future information leaks, Tessa mentioned an investment opportunity she'd been researching. It's a bit outside our usual focus, she admitted, but the potential upside is massive. Have you been following the developments in predictive AI for market forecasting? I hadn't been, but Tessa's enthusiastic explanation captured my attention. By the end of our meeting, I had a new direction not just for healing, but for building something even bigger, something that would make Optimize Pro look like a student project in comparison. Michael's betrayal had closed one door but opened another, and this time, I would build walls so high and strong that not even my family could scale them. The predictive AI technology Tessa had identified wasn't just promising, it was revolutionary. The algorithm could analyze vast quantities of market data and identify patterns humans would miss, making trading predictions with uncanny accuracy. The creator, Devin Carter, was a mathematical genius who had been overlooked by major financial institutions because of his unconventional background. No Ivy League degree, no family connections, just raw talent and years of solitary work. When we first met in a quiet Seattle cafe, Devin was suspicious. Why would Mitchell Capital be interested? I don't fit your investment profile. Because I recognize what you've built, I replied. And because I know what it's like to have your work undervalued because of who you aren't. Over the following weeks, we negotiated a partnership structure. Mitchell Capital would provide $10 million in development funding, plus connections to financial institutions for testing and implementation. In return, we would receive exclusive licensing rights and a 40% equity stake in the new company, Quantum Predict. Rather than rush to market, we spent 18 months refining the technology, filing patents, and building an unassailable legal position. Unlike my brother, I understood the value of patience and thoroughness. When we finally launched Quantum Predict, the financial world took notice immediately. The system's accuracy rate of 87% in predicting market movements outperformed every comparable technology by a substantial margin. Major banks and hedge funds lined up to license our platform. Within 2 quarters, the company was valued at $1.2 billion. My personal wealth, on paper at least, had increased tenfold. Fortune magazine put me on their cover, with the headline "The Algorithm Queen: How Samantha Mitchell is Revolutionizing Financial Technology Again." The article detailed my journey from overlooked sister to powerhouse investor and entrepreneur. Jason's company, meanwhile, had achieved modest success in the crowded blockchain space. Its most recent valuation was around $50 million, respectable, but nowhere near Quantum Predict's unicorn status. For the first time in our lives, the gulf between our achievements was too wide for even our parents to minimize. Family dynamics shifted accordingly. Dad, ever practical about aligning himself with success, began calling regularly for catch-up chats that inevitably included questions about my investment strategies. Mom sent expensive gifts and constantly suggested visits. Jason maintained a careful distance, our last interaction having exposed his manipulation too clearly to be easily forgotten. I maintained cordial but boundary-enforced relationships with them all, focused instead on growing my business empire and the Ruth Mitchell Foundation, which was now supporting dozens of female entrepreneurs annually. It was during this period of unparalleled success that I learned about the Lakeside Estate. The property was legendary in Chicago real estate circles, a historic mansion on 5 acres of lakefront property, originally built by a Prohibition-era banker and maintained in immaculate condition through generations of wealthy owners. With 10 bedrooms, indoor and outdoor pools, a private dock, and gardens designed by a renowned landscape architect, it was considered one of the premier residential properties in the Midwest. I heard about it through an unlikely source. My mother. "Your brother is so excited," she gushed during one of our monthly calls. "He's about to close on the Lakeside Estate. You remember Mr. Harrington mentioning it at those Christmas parties years ago?" I did remember. Dad's former boss, Thomas Harrington, had spoken of the estate with reverence, calling it the crown jewel of Chicago real estate. Dad would nod along, occasionally mentioning that someday he might own a property of similar stature. "Jason's been negotiating for months," Mom continued. "The owners are only selling to someone who'll preserve its historical character, so they've chosen him over developers who wanted to subdivide. Your father is so proud he always dreamed of owning that property himself." Something clicked into place. The estate wasn't just an impressive property, it was a symbol of everything my father had aspired to but never quite achieved. And now Jason, the son who had followed in his footsteps, would claim this prize instead. "That's wonderful," I said neutrally. "What's the asking price?" "Just over $5 million, I believe. Jason's working with the bank on financing." It's such a statement piece. Everyone who matters in Chicago knows the Lakeside Estate. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, turning over this information. The property itself didn't interest me. I had no desire to live in Chicago. But the symbolism was undeniable. This was the ultimate status symbol in my father's world, the physical embodiment of success as he defined it. And Jason was about to claim it, cementing his position as the true successor to Richard Mitchell's legacy. I called a real estate contact in Chicago. "The Lakeside Estate?" "Yes. It's under contract, but the deal hasn't closed," she confirmed. "Financing issues, I hear. The seller is getting anxious." "What's the actual asking price?" $5.2 million. It's actually undervalued. They could get 7 easily if they were willing to sell to developers. And the current buyer? Some tech entrepreneur. Family connections to local business community. But between us, the sellers are nervous about his financing coming through. They've already extended the closing date twice. I made my decision in that moment. "I'd like you to approach the sellers with an all-cash offer at full asking price, contingent on a 48-hour closing." "All cash?" She sounded stunned. "That would certainly get their attention. But the property is under contract. Contracts fall through all the time. Just let them know the offer exists. My name stays confidential for now." 2 days later, my phone rang with news. The sellers were interested. Jason's financing had hit another snag, and they were losing patience. If I could truly close in 48 hours, they would find a way to exit the existing contract. I instructed my team to wire the funds and prepare the paperwork. By the end of the week, the lakeside estate was mine. I didn't inform my family. Instead, I arranged for minor renovations and planned to let the news filter through Chicago's social circles naturally. The revenge would be sweeter if it unfolded without my apparent orchestration. It took less than 2 weeks. My phone lit up with Jason's name on a Tuesday evening. "You bought the lakeside estate." His voice was flat, controlled fury vibrating beneath the surface. "I did. You don't even want to live in Chicago. You did this just to spite me. I made a business decision. The property was undervalued." "Bullshit." The control slipped. "You knew I was buying it. You knew what it meant to Dad. Like you knew what Optimize Pro meant to me? Or what Michael meant to me? Or what my ideas meant before you stole them." Silence hung between us for several seconds. "Does Dad know?" I finally asked. "Yes." The single syllable carried volumes of subtext. "He's processing." My mother called next, her voice tight with disapproval. "Samantha, how could you do this to your brother? To your father? This property meant everything to them." "It's just real estate, Mom. Don't be deliberately obtuse. You know exactly what you've done." Perhaps I did. Perhaps this purchase, this $5 million power move, was petty and vindictive. But after a lifetime of being undermined, overlooked, and betrayed by the people who should have supported me most, it felt like justice. The final call came from my father the following day. "I'd like to see this property you've purchased," he said without preamble. "Since it won't be a family home after all, perhaps you'd allow your mother and me to tour it." His voice held something I'd never heard before, a mixture of anger, respect, and what sounded almost like fear. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably, and we both knew it. "Of course," I replied. "I'll have my assistant arrange it." As I hung up, I wondered if this victory would feel as sweet as I'd imagined, or if the emptiness settling in my chest was the true cost of winning on my father's terms. The lakeside estate was even more impressive in person. As I walked through its grand entrance for the first time as owner, I tried to see it through my father's eyes. The hand-carved mahogany staircase, Venetian crystal chandeliers, marble imported from Carrara, Italy, all symbols of old money prestige that Richard Mitchell had coveted his entire career. My property manager, a discreet professional named Margaret, gave me a thorough tour, pointing out historical details and recent improvements. The previous owners maintained everything meticulously, she explained as we entered the main library, its walls lined with built-in bookshelves of walnut. They were particularly concerned the estate would fall into the hands of developers who might subdivide the grounds. "I have no such plans," I assured her. "The property will remain intact." I had researched the estate thoroughly before finalizing the purchase. Built in 1927 by banking magnate William Caldwell, it had passed through only 4 owners in its history, each adding tasteful improvements while preserving its architectural integrity. The current sellers, an elderly couple relocating to Arizona for health reasons, had owned it for 27 years. What I hadn't known until my conversation with Margaret was how close Jason had actually come to securing the property. The previous buyers seemed quite determined, she mentioned as we toured the gardens. They'd visited multiple times, discussing renovation plans in great detail. The wife especially seemed to have her heart set on the property. The wife? I stopped walking. Yes, a lovely young woman. Marketing executive, I believe. She had quite specific ideas about updating the kitchen while preserving its vintage charm. Jason's girlfriend. They'd been planning this together, creating their perfect family estate, likely with our parents' blessing and financial support. When I'd authorized my real estate agent to pursue the property, I'd known I was interfering with Jason's plans, but I hadn't realized how far along those plans were. The revenge I'd intended suddenly felt more personal, more cutting than I'd anticipated. The seller had accepted my offer for 2 simple reasons. I could pay the full $5.2 million in cash, and I could close the deal in 48 hours. For an elderly couple eager to relocate for medical reasons, these advantages outweighed any loyalty to Jason's more complicated financing arrangement. The actual closing had been remarkably straightforward. Electronic fund transfers, digital signatures, and a conference call with attorneys had completed the largest single purchase of my life with anticlimactic efficiency. The only physical component had been the ceremonial handover of the keys, which now felt heavy in my pocket as I completed my tour of the grounds. I decided to make only minimal changes to the property for now updated security systems, some infrastructure, modernization, and restoration of the gardens to their original design. The grandeur of the estate spoke for itself. It needed no embellishment from me. As predicted, Jason called me in a fury when he discovered what had happened. His rage was incandescent, accusations pouring forth about my pathological need to compete and sick desire to hurt my own family. "You don't even want this house," he shouted. "You live in Seattle. This was my chance to build something meaningful. Like you built Optimize Pro?" I replied calmly. "Or your crypto platform that Dad funded? Or your blockchain real estate venture? How many chances do you need, Jason? This is different. This house meant something to Dad." "Yes," I acknowledged. "That's precisely why I bought it." The stunned silence on the other end suggested this was the first time Jason had confronted the true motivation behind my purchase. Not spite directed at him, but a message intended for our father. My parents' reaction had been more measured but equally revealing. My mother called, voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "I simply don't understand why you would do this, Samantha. You knew your brother had his heart set on that property. The way you went behind his back, it's just so vindictive. Was it vindictive when he stole my business idea? Or when he tried to poach my business partner? Or when he manipulated my boyfriend to gather intelligence on my company? Where was your concern for fairness then?" Mom sighed dramatically. "Must you always dwell in the past? Families forgive each other. They move forward. I have moved forward, Mom. $5.2 million forward, to be exact." The silence that followed told me she finally understood. This wasn't just about a house. It was about decades of dismissal and favoritism. "Your father wants to see the property," she finally said. "Since it will remain in the family, at least in some sense." I agreed to a visit, setting the stage for what would become the most revealing family gathering in Mitchell history. They arrived on a sunny Saturday afternoon, my parents, Jason, and his girlfriend, Melissa. The dynamic was immediately tense, with Jason barely acknowledging me as they stepped into the grand foyer. "It's even more magnificent than I remembered," my mother murmured, gazing up at the crystal chandelier. "The Harringtons attended a charity gala here in the 90s. I never dreamed it would one day belong to my daughter." My father remained oddly silent, his expression unreadable as he surveyed what might have been the crowning achievement of his real estate career. The home he had coveted but never quite attained was now his daughter's property, bought and paid for without his connections, his advice, or his approval. I led them through the main floor, watching as Melissa whispered to Jason, likely comparing the reality to the plans they had made. Her expression shifted between admiration and resentment, occasionally shooting glances my way that ranged from curious to hostile. In the formal dining room, with its table that could seat 20, my father finally spoke. "The woodwork is original craftsman," he noted, running his hand along the wainscoting. "You won't find this quality in modern construction." "I know," I replied. "The property's historical significance was a major factor in my decision to purchase it." "A purchase you made knowing your brother was in negotiations," he countered, his voice hardening, "knowing what this property meant to him. To me." And there it was, the real issue laid bare. I had acquired something he had wanted but never achieved, and I had done it effortlessly, with cash, before his son could manage it with his help. Yes, I acknowledged. I knew exactly what I was doing. The tension in the room was palpable. Mom busied herself examining the china cabinet, pretending not to hear. Jason stared out the window toward the lake, jaw clenched. Melissa fidgeted with her purse strap. "Why?" my father asked simply. I met his gaze directly. "Because for my entire life, you've made it clear that Jason's achievements matter more than mine, that his dreams deserve support, while mine are afterthoughts. I wanted you to feel what that's like, to have something you want taken away by someone who doesn't value your desires." Dad's face flushed. "That's not true. We've always supported both our children equally. The absurdity of this claim hung in the air until Jason, surprisingly, broke the silence. Come on, Dad, that's bullshit and we all know it. 4 pairs of eyes turned to him in shock. Sammy got screwed, he continued. Something like genuine realization dawning on his face. You funded every half-baked idea I ever had while she worked 3 jobs to get through college. You introduced me to every business contact you had while she built her network from scratch. Mom stepped forward, alarmed. Jason, you're upset about the house. This isn't the time. No, it's exactly the time, he interrupted. I'm pissed as hell about the house, but I'm not blind. I've had every advantage, and I've still managed to screw up most of what I've touched. Meanwhile, she's built an actual empire despite having no support from her family. I stared at my brother, wondering if this was yet another manipulation. But the anger and frustration in his eyes seemed directed inward for once. Dad remained silent, his expression a complex mixture of defensiveness and discomfort. Decades of family dynamics were being challenged, and he seemed genuinely unsure how to respond. The moment of potential breakthrough was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Margaret entered the foyer with a concerned expression. Miss Mitchell? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation with the security system installation that requires your attention. I excused myself, grateful for the momentary escape from the emotional intensity of the confrontation. By the time I returned 15 minutes later, the moment had passed. The family had moved to the terrace. Conversations steered to safer topics, like the gardens and the view of the lake. As they prepared to leave, my father lingered behind while the others headed to the car. You've done well for yourself, Samantha, he said quietly. Better than I would have predicted. It was as close to an admission as I was likely to get acknowledgement that he had underestimated me, that my success had surpassed his expectations. Thank you, I replied, unsure what else to say. He glanced around the grand entrance hall once more. Will you actually live here? Eventually, perhaps. For now, I'm considering hosting events for the Ruth Mitchell Foundation. Grandmother would have appreciated the irony. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. She would have. He hesitated, then added, Your grandmother always saw something in you that I missed. I'm beginning to understand what it was. He turned to leave, then paused. One question, was it worth it? Buying this place just to prove a point? I considered the question carefully. Ask me after the housewarming party. You're all invited, of course. As I watched them drive away, I wondered the same thing myself. The revenge had been executed perfectly, but the satisfaction I'd anticipated felt hollow, complicated by Jason's unexpected moment of self-awareness and my father's grudging respect. I stood alone in the massive foyer of a house I had no real desire to live in, purchased primarily to make a point to people whose opinions I'd spent years convincing myself I no longer valued. The sweet taste of revenge, it seemed, had a surprisingly bitter aftertaste. 6 months passed before I returned to the lakeside estate. After our family confrontation, I had left Margaret in charge of the planned renovations and returned to Seattle, immersing myself in work. Quantum Predict was expanding globally. The Ruth Mitchell Foundation had doubled its grant program, and Mitchell Capital had just closed its second fund at $200 million. Success continued to accumulate, but something had shifted inside me since that day in Chicago. The drive that had propelled me forward for so many years, proving my worth to a family that had overlooked me, no longer seemed sufficient. I had proven myself beyond any reasonable doubt. What would motivate me now? The estate had been transformed in my absence. Margaret had overseen the restoration of the gardens to their original 1,920 seconds glory, updated all systems to state-of-the-art while preserving historical elements, and furnished the previously empty rooms with period-appropriate pieces that honored the home's heritage while ensuring modern comfort. It's magnificent, I told her as we completed our tour. You've done exactly what I would have wanted. Thank you, Miss Mitchell. Will you be staying long this visit? I considered the question. Yes, I think I will. At least a few weeks. The decision surprised me as much as her, but suddenly it felt right to spend time in this space that had become such a significant symbol in my life. Not just as a power move against my family, but as a tangible manifestation of how far I had come. Living in the estate was a surreal experience. The grand spaces were designed for entertaining, for families, for a life filled with people. Instead, my footsteps echoed through marble hallways, and I took my morning coffee on a terrace built for garden parties. The emptiness was both peaceful and vaguely melancholic. I spent my days working remotely, taking video calls from the library and reviewing investment proposals in the sunroom. In the evenings, I explored the grounds, sometimes sitting by the lake until sunset, contemplating the journey that had led me here. The truth I gradually admitted to myself was that revenge, even perfectly executed revenge, was ultimately empty. I had purchased this estate to prove something to my family, but the only person living with the consequences was me. During my third week at the estate, I received an unexpected visitor. My mother arrived unannounced one afternoon, looking uncharacteristically nervous as Margaret showed her to the library where I was working. "Mom?" I stood, surprised. "Is everything all right?" She nodded, glancing around the book-lined room. "I called your office in Seattle. They said you were staying here for a while." She hesitated. "I should have called first." "It's fine," I assured her, gesturing to a chair. "Would you like some tea?" The formality between us felt strange, mother and daughter conducting themselves like polite acquaintances. After Margaret brought tea and departed, an uncomfortable silence settled over us. "This is a beautiful room," Mom finally said. "The whole house is just lovely. You've done wonderful things with it." "Thank you." Margaret deserves most of the credit. Another silence stretched between us until Mom set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "I came to apologize, Samantha." I blinked, unsure I had heard correctly. "For what?" "For all of it." Her voice wavered. "For never giving you the support Jason received. For not seeing your potential. For making you feel less valued." I sat very still, afraid that any movement might break this unprecedented moment. "Your grandmother used to tell me I was blind when it came to you," she continued. "She said I was so busy looking at Jason through your father's eyes that I couldn't see you clearly with my own." She looked down at her hands. She was right. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Because life is short. Because I miss my daughter. Because watching you and Jason at each other's throats has finally become more painful than admitting I was wrong." She met my gaze directly. "And because I'm finally ready to see you for who you are, not who I expected you to be." The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd ever shared. Mom acknowledged the favoritism that had shaped our family, admitted her awareness of it even as it happened, and expressed genuine regret for her role in perpetuating it. "Your father and I came from different worlds," she explained. "He was ambitious, driven to succeed in ways my family never was. When Jason showed those same traits, Richard was thrilled. When you showed even stronger versions of those qualities, I think he felt threatened, somehow. And you went along with it." I did. Her admission was simple but powerful. It was easier than challenging him. Easier than acknowledging we were damaging you. By the time she left that evening, something had shifted between us, not healed completely, but opened to the possibility of healing. She promised to visit again, this time with advance notice, and suggested a mother-daughter weekend that would have seemed unimaginable just days earlier. 2 weeks later, I received news that further complicated my family relationships. My father had been diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer. The prognosis was good with treatment, but the diagnosis had shaken him. Mom called to tell me, carefully adding that Dad would understand if you don't want to be involved. The old Samantha might have seen this as karmic justice, or at least as not her problem. The woman I was becoming recognized it as an opportunity not for reconciliation necessarily, but for resolution. I called my father directly, offering to connect him with the best oncologists through my medical technology investments. He accepted with gruff gratitude, and our conversations gradually expanded beyond his treatment to cautious discussions about business, the estate, and occasionally, tentatively, our past. The most surprising development came from Jason. He suggested meeting for coffee at a neutral location during my next trip to Chicago, just us. No parents, no significant others. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the awkwardness between us immediately apparent. After exchanging stilted pleasantries, Jason got straight to the point. "I've been in therapy," he announced abruptly. "Turns out I have some issues with competition and validation. Despite myself, I laughed. You think? His mouth quirked up. Yeah, shocking, right? But seriously, Sammy, I've been forced to look at my behavior, especially toward you. And it's not pretty. No, it wasn't. I was insecure, he admitted. All my life, I was Dad's golden boy. But I always knew that you were smarter than me. More capable. More disciplined. I took Dad's support because I needed it. And I took your ideas because I didn't trust my own. His candor was disarming. That doesn't excuse any of it, Jason. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, the pattern, the betrayals, all of it. He stared into his coffee. For what it's worth, I'm trying to be better. Because of therapy? Partly. Also because of Melissa leaving me. I hadn't heard about this development. I'm sorry. He shrugged. Don't be. She said she couldn't build a life with someone who measured his worth by what he could take from others. He looked up, meeting my eyes. She wasn't wrong. We parted that day with no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful hugs or promises to start fresh. Instead, we had something potentially more valuable: honesty. Jason was beginning to confront his demons, and I was beginning to see him as a flawed human rather than an antagonist in my life story. As weeks turned to months, these tentative steps toward authentic family relationships continued. There were setbacks and old patterns that reasserted themselves, especially between my father and me. But there were also moments of genuine connection that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Meanwhile, I made a decision about the lakeside estate. Rather than keeping it as a rarely used trophy or selling it to recoup my investment, I established it as the headquarters for the Ruth Mitchell Foundation. The grand spaces that had once hosted Chicago's elite now welcomed female entrepreneurs for mentorship retreats, networking events, and educational programs. During one such event, watching 30 women coding in the same dining room where my family's painful confrontation had occurred, I felt something shift inside me. The estate had transformed from a symbol of revenge to one of possibility not just for me, but for women following paths similar to mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma Chen, the first recipient of a Ruth Mitchell Foundation grant. Her medical data platform had just secured Series B funding at a $400 million valuation. Could never have done this without your belief in me, her message read. You changed everything. Standing in the grand home I had purchased out of spite but reinvented with purpose, I finally understood what true success meant. Not proving my worth to people who should have recognized it all along, but creating opportunities for others to discover their own worth. Grandma Ruth would have approved. Success is the sweetest revenge, she had told me years ago. But the sweetness didn't come from making others regret their dismissal. It came from building something so meaningful that their opinions no longer mattered at all. I still had work to do on myself. The driving need for validation that had propelled me forward for so many years couldn't be resolved overnight. The complicated relationships with my family would never be perfect. But standing in this house that had once represented everything I thought I wanted to prove, I finally felt something I hadn't expected: peace. It turned out the house was just a house after all. My real achievement was becoming someone who no longer needed her family's validation to know her own worth. If you've made it to the end of my story, I'd love to know. Have you ever had to prove yourself to family members who underestimated you? What did you learn from that experience? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this reminder. True success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living well on your own terms.